Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would chat with you guys a little bit about knee pain because it's something that comes up a lot, and you get a lot of people who have knee pain from squatting who don't understand why they get it, where it comes from, or they have other sports injuries or a history of knee pain or knee inflammation. And I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the best solution for it for anyone with a history of knee problems. Now, we could argue that learning to squat correctly and having a strong posterior chain will prevent the problem for most people to begin with. In other words, squats are not inherently hard on your knees, but the way some people perform squats can be hard on your knees. So the real solution is, of course, to do deep box squats, first of all. And by deep, if you guys even watched there, that was a max. I just hit a 1 rep max on my box squat. I had a little bit of forward travel of the knees, but I'm actually working even myself on getting further back. But the point you'll notice with box squats is that there's no knee slide. The knee doesn't shift forward when they're done correctly, right? The knee doesn't shift forward. And that's one of the things that we are looking for because it's the lack of shear stress on the knee. Now, we know that usually people who squat high have a lot of knee shear, right? It puts the most shear stress on the knee. Arguably something like a front squat is probably the worst. So, I mean, you'll have people actually discuss front squatting, and I always tell people the front squat has its place for certain forms of athletes, but for a base exercise for a lot of you is probably not ideal. Squatting with a barbell on your back is going to put more size and strength on you. But there's also the issue of it is easier to have knee slide, and people with a history of knee issues, it could be a problem. But half squats are usually the biggest culprit. Knee wraps are your next biggest culprit. Doing your jump work where you land on the ground, I mean, again, impact, those are all factors. It's why when we do jumps, we jump on top of boxes. It's why every athlete in the world does it. That's why I do it. Right? You don't jump in the air and land on the ground regularly. If you're in a sport that requires you to do so, by all means do so. But you shouldn't do so in training. And I am very pro jumping at this point. So I don't want people to think I'm against jumping. But the whole point there is that you have to learn to avoid doing half squat. So that includes on your box squat. I am squatting onto a box that's 12 inches. And as I've made numerous videos on, that's one of the hardest things to get people to do with a box squat is to squat to an appropriate depth box. And literally you can even tell someone that needs to be a 12-inch box and they will still not squat onto a 12-inch box, right? And for those who don't understand, the average bench in a gym is 18 inches. That's standard bench height. Some of them are 20. Some of the boxes are up to 24. So, you'll have people who will do that and they don't understand. It's actually that deep knee bend that you get while sitting back. And the same thing when people learn to box squat, a lot of times you'll have people who still have excessive amounts of knee slide because they're just tapping to the box. They're leaning way forward with everything. Their knee is pushing way past the toe instead of sitting back. And that's one of the things you have to work on. But what you'll notice is that a properly performed box squat where you sit back, you're in a wide stance. You're like in a sumo type stance. And that's what I'm doing here in these. And even then, I have a little bit of forward knee travel, so I'm working on this myself. But mine's pretty decent at this point. I have clients who actually do it all the way correctly. But it's something that you learn to do over time, and it's by learning to sit back. And by sitting back, I don't mean you rock your torso back. I mean that butt comes back. But by doing that, it takes all the shear off the knee. Right? It takes all the shear off the knee. And that wider stance trains various mobilities and will give you better overall joint health if you learn to do it correctly. So that's one of the keys. Then we combine that with lots of posterior chain training. Now in my case, you guys see me doing heavy sets of 10 with good mornings here with the safety bar. Now ironically, some people might say, well, it's only 205. And it's like, yeah, do those with a safety bar. It's different levers. You have a totally different moment arm than when you put a barbell in the low bar position on your back. Different beast. But this is one example of posterior chain and hamstring training. So having strong hamstrings is also part of the equation, because if you're interior dominant, and we need big quads, if you want to be a great athlete and you want to be strong and powerful, you need quads. But you don't want to be interior dominant, and we don't fix interior dominance by saying we don't train our quads, right? because you want the biggest quads you can get away with. I mean, realistically speaking, if you want to be strong and athletic, you need to have He-Man quads, right? You want to jump, you want to kick, you want to sprint, you want to squat, you better have quads. And the bigger the better. Problem is that they can't be disproportionate. So we need to put a heavier focus on posterior chain and hamstring work. Now, one of the big perks, that wide stance box squat to a low box, does work your hamstrings and posterior chain more. But you still need a pretty fair amount of supplemental work. And so what are different examples of things we could do? Good mornings, right there, high on the list. Now, you could do Romanian deadlifts, of course. But I generally don't prescribe Romanian deadlifts unless people need the extra specific grip training from them, right? They're great for people who need a hip hinge, who need extra grip work, all incorporated together, like someone who's still base building particularly. But it's not my default prescription because I feel like the good morning brings a little more to the table. But you could do Romanian deadlifts. Now, the Romanian deadlift is, of course, what many people think of as a stiff leg deadlift. Right, now, a stiff leg deadlift is pulled off the floor with a rounded back and your knees locked. That's a stiff leg deadlift. The Romanian is the one that looks just like the good morning here, but you're holding the barbell in your hands, right? And the bar doesn't touch the ground. You have an eccentric base exercise and you snap up. You get a stretch reflex. But as you guys can see, you get the exact same thing from a good morning. Also, you'll notice that when you take that wide stance like I do, it becomes a little more hamstring dominant. Again, you will feel the different heads of your hamstring, right? That matters. What else? Glute ham raises. I haven't been doing those on camera, so I don't have any footage. You guys see my device over in the corner. I do them. In fact, I'm trying to do them most days of the week at this point, part of my actual conditioning training in my circuits. So, glute ham raise. Very high on the list as far as building the hamstrings. In fact, it gives a unique effect we don't get from the other hip hinges. Your hamstring has 3 heads. Only 2 of those heads get fully activated from normal hip hinging movements like good mornings, deadlifts of any type, things like that. You have a 3rd head that doesn't get activated as much unless you get that full bend of the knee, right? So we get that. The only way to do that is either with certain leg curls or the glute ham device. So the glute ham device is a knee saver because it has the ability to build all 3 heads of the hamstring. And for people who want a closer reference, who are used to, who are upper body bros, think of it exactly like the triceps, right? Think of it like the triceps. You have 3 heads of the tricep, and one of them is only activated heavily at one of the joints, whereas in the other 2 are activated by both joints. So it's the same thing there. That long head of your tricep is usually the lazy head. Well, we have a head like that in the hamstrings, and it requires you to contract the knee just like you would your bicep, right? It's biceps on the back of your leg. It's just that most of the hamstring can be activated through a hip hinge even with a straight leg. But you do need that deep knee bend to fully activate all of it. Well, the glute ham device is a knee saver if you're strong enough to do them. If you're strong enough to do them. But there are ways to do them lighter. They're usually adjustable. That bench is adjustable so that you can get better comfort, and you can change the position to make it easier. You could, in theory, also set up a reverse band setup with one if you weren't strong enough. And that would work also if you needed to be able to build it up. But the glute ham device, phenomenal. Phenomenal for this. But failing that, good mornings can do a pretty decent job. I recommend that you do both. In perfect world, an athlete will do both. And combine that with the box squats. And that combination is what will build all the support musculature up around the knee, strengthen all the connective tissue, but remove the shear off the knee so that you can train harder, train heavier, train more, and not get those problems in your knee joint. So that's your solutions. That works. The things that you have to absolutely avoid, though, are any sort of partial squat. Partial squats of any type will destroy your knees eventually. Knee wraps will destroy your knees eventually. All right? And a lot of people think, but it seems to help my knees. No, it doesn't. Your knees don't hurt when you do them because it's cutting off circulation and making them numb. The actual wrap itself causes a tremendous amount of damage over time, just on its own. So you've got to avoid those things. All right, guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.